Welcome back to University of Illinois Extension's local government education platform. We're happy to host these weekly BEAD challenge process lunch and learns with Devon Braunstein, Assistant Director at the Illinois Office of Broadband. Thank you so much for being here, Devon, and continuing to do this ongoing outreach with us. Got about 40 participants on the call now. We'll have a Q&A after this. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it to you and let you kick off the program.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again for having me, and thanks everyone for joining our weekly webinars. So today we are going to focus on an evidence deep dive as well as reviewing some of our bulk challenge CSVs and have some updates to share on documents that will be live for your access later today. A couple of objectives. So again, we'll get familiar with what the BEAD challenge process is and how to participate. We have a couple of new resources that we'll share. And then we'll go into some examples of evidence, so you know what is a valid piece of evidence that you can start collecting, as well as how to use bulk challenge CSVs. There were a couple of additions since we spoke about these last, so we will touch upon those as well. So we'll start with our overview, go into an evidence deep dive, then review bulk challenge CSV templates, and close out with Q&A and next steps. All right, so we have our BEAD review in the beginning here. So to recap, the goal of BEAD is universal broadband coverage across Illinois using fiber wherever possible. So this challenge process kicks off how we will allocate the $1.04 billion that have been allocated to Illinois over the next 5 years to cover all unserved and underserved households. The goal is to include a low-cost broadband service option as well as a middle-class affordability plan. We'll work to select sub-grantees to actually cover each part of the state over the first year following the challenge process, and then the next 4 years following that will involve implementation. So to give a snapshot on where we are in the challenge process, pre-registration has now been live for probably about a month now. I'm sure many of you have already pre-registered, but if you have not, a reminder that pre-registration is required to get your login credentials to log into the challenge portal and participate in the challenge process. Then the next step is publishing that map and all locations. So the map is live as of January 22nd. We'll be locking in the data any day now. So we encourage you to review that map, take a look at locations and communities of interest, check their eligibility status, and if the broadband availability indicated on the map is different than what you're experiencing or what you know, we encourage you to start collecting your evidence to participate in the challenge process. I know folks have been eagerly awaiting the list via CSV of all of the unserved, underserved, and served location IDs, as well as all of the community anchor institutions. Those lists have been finalized, and I am working with our website folks as we speak to get them on the landing page today. So I'll make sure to send a note to all the pre-registrants once those are up, but please expect those today, assuming everything goes smoothly with that. And then, of course, the next step is the challenge process opening. We are in February now, but really excited to be checking off these final items on our list with NTIA to open as soon as we can. Before the formal challenge portal opens, we will have a 7-day period where the map is sort of final and locked in. We have our user guide and our rules and guidelines for the challenge process publicly posted, as well as those lists of all of the location IDs, community anchor institutions, and their availability. So you have a week to kind of get even more comfortable with them and prepare for that formal opening of the challenge portal. Following the challenge period, which will be 21 days, we'll get everything organized and validated on our end, and then be prepared to publish the challenges received and assign them to providers and other entities who will have the opportunity to submit a rebuttal should they have evidence that that challenge does not reflect the reality. So that rebuttal period will be another 21 days. And then finally, we will close with adjudication and making those final determinations about the map. That will lock in our final map to inform the BEAD process going forward. So making a lot of exciting progress, and I think February is going to be a really big month. Just a reminder what the challenge process is. We want to make sure that our map is accurate and reflects everyone's experiences of broadband availability in their communities. This is important because it directly impacts which locations are eligible for funding. There are 3 entities who are eligible to directly submit challenges through the challenge portal. That is units of local government, nonprofit organizations, and ISPs. And we encourage individuals to participate either by taking 3 speed tests over 3 days at beadchallenge.org or sharing their evidence for a challenge with a eligible entity like a local government or a nonprofit. Every location that you see on the BEAD challenge map is up for a challenge. And the process will be launching, we think, within the next 2 weeks, and will be open for 21 days. All right, so not going to go through all of these terms, but really just note the difference between a broadband serviceable location, a BSL, and a CAI. A BSL is more like a home or a business. A CAI is a library, a school, certain nonprofits, jails and prisons, health institutions, and organizations like that. And also keep note of our terms unserved, underserved, and served here. If locations are unserved or underserved based on the speeds available, they will be eligible for BEAD funding. If they're marked as served, they will not be eligible. You'll also see community anchor institutions having a status of served or not served, or eligible or not eligible, based on whether or not they can access 1 gigabit symmetrical service. So pre-registration, like I said, we have many folks pre-registered, which is great. You should have all received at least 1 confirmation, if not more, as well as some updates earlier this week. We are now in the process of verifying your information, and once you are verified using that unique ID provided, like an EIN or an FRN, we will be gearing up to share login credentials with you closer to that portal launch date. A note is that there are some folks who we could not verify. So if that is you, please look out for communication, likely from Shubhika, myself, or our broadband at illinois.gov, requesting that you submit the form again to make sure that we have the proper information and can make sure that you are eligible to participate. All right, so a final reminder about our landing page, dceo.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge. This is where the most relevant information is, all of the recordings. I know some folks have gone onto the YouTube page, but really if you want to stay targeted and just look at what is most recent, this is where you'll find it. And as of today, this will look a little bit different. We're kind of making some modifications to account for the new resources that we're posting, like the CSV templates and the lists of location IDs. So again, we'll send a ping to everyone once those changes are live, but this page is your go-to, star it, bookmark it, whatever you need to do to make sure that you have this handy. A reminder that there will be 2 ways to participate in the challenge process. The first is through the BEAD challenge map. So if you do not have access to the FCC Fabric via a license, or that doesn't sound familiar to you, we encourage you to go to the BEAD challenge map. You can search for a zip code, an address, a location, select a series of locations, and start saving them if you would like to challenge them later on. A quick tip on this front: while the map does save all of the challenges that you save for your next session, a sort of surefire way to just make sure that you don't lose any work is you can download all of your saved challenges to a CSV to your computer. So that is on the challenges tab. So I recommend doing that if you're kind of working on collecting locations over a couple of days. And then if you do have access to the FCC Fabric data, feel free to forego the map altogether. You can look to check kind of the eligibility status, but you're looking at probably more of a bulk challenge, or you can just go directly to the portal once you have what you need. This is a little flow chart just to kind of summarize what I just said. So whether or not you have access to the FCC Fabric data will kind of guide your process here. So if you don't, head to that BEAD challenge map to make sure you grab the locations with their location IDs or CAI IDs for CAIs. We welcome you to, or you'll be able to go to the challenge portal directly and use those bulk CSV templates, which we will be talking about today. Quick review of challenge types. So this, we're going to be posting some documentation. It has all of these points in one playlist of challenge types. And so any sort of CSV will ask you for a code. So just make sure that you're pulling the code from a table that looks like this, so we know what type of challenge that you are submitting. And then just a reminder about when we talk about CAIs or community anchor institutions, what are we talking about? This is a definition that the state adopted from NTIA and then was able to refine based on our public comment process and over our curing period. So here's kind of how we're formally defining CAIs. They provide critical services and support to residents, particularly those in underrepresented communities. The requirement is that a CAI who does not have access to gigabit symmetrical service will be considered eligible for funding. And the goal is to get every CAI connected to that that gigabit symmetrical service. So you can see here the institutions that qualify as CAIs: schools, libraries, government buildings, health centers, public safety entities, public housing organizations, community support organizations like senior centers and employment centers, and then parks. A couple of new resources. So we have a new one-pager geared specifically towards local government nonprofits who may just kind of want the basics on what is the challenge process do and how does it impact me and how can I help. So we'll share this out with the rest of the resources later today, but know that this one pager is online. Feel free to print it, share it out, or just and similarly, this is sort of a BEAD one pager just about the BEAD program and how it impacts Illinois residents and kind of what are the basics that you need to know. So we are kind of creating things as we hear interest. So if there is something that you need in order to get the word out in your community or among folks in your organization, let us know any feedback, and we'll sort of be responsive to those needs. A couple of updates and tips. So first, the BEAD challenge map. There's a lot of data feeding into the map. And so a couple of tips to kind of get the best user experience. The first is using Google Chrome. It seems to be working best on the Chrome browser. And then to sort of get the best view of a location, we recommend typing in an address or a zip code. And that'll kind of get you zoomed in at a level where it's easier to click on a location and then view different elements of it. Community anchor institutions, we found that the actual location of it on the map might be slightly different from where you know it to be. So definitely look at the address, and if you see anything a little funky, let us know, and we'll make sure to get that fixed. Updates, like I said, we're making some big changes to the landing page as we speak today. We'll have all of the CSV templates for bulk challenges available for download, along with guides on evidence, guides on what each field means, where to find each thing. It's a complex process, but we're trying to make it as easy for you as we can. So we'll have that reference information, and then we'll have the full list of CSVs of unserved, underserved, and served location IDs, as well as the list of all CAIs and their status of eligible or not eligible. All right, I will pass it along to Shubhika to walk us through the evidence deep dive.
Sure. Thanks, Devon. Hello, everybody. So now moving on to the evidence piece, and this is like the most important bit because as we're making our decisions and also the information that's going to go to like rebutters, this is the first thing they're gonna see when to get a sense of why exactly a location was challenged. So I think in the next few slides, going over the different challenge types and sharing examples for different pieces of evidence that would most likely help us make those decisions and share that accurate information between challengers, rebutters, and all of that. So starting on with availability. So this is when, there is broadband service reported at that particular location. It could be an MDU as well. But in, the customer experience side of it, you do not believe that, there is availability at that location based on your experience. So this could be shared based on a screenshot from the provider website. On here, marked as A, we have a picture of the evidence, what this might look like. So go on to your respective provider's website, type in your address, and see if they list as providing service to your location on their website. If not, that could be used as evidence for such kind of a challenge. The next one is if there is a communication, an email or a letter from them within the last 180 days that shows that, they are unable to provide service or have refused to provide service at your location, that would qualify as a valid evidence piece. Lack of suitable infrastructure. So an example is no fiber on pole. If you're somebody who has, a really good understanding of infrastructure and how it's actually deployed to your location, this might be something to look at. But if not, there are all of these other ways where you've actually had communication with the provider and can share better evidence with us in terms of you weren't able to get that service to your location. The next one, a letter or email, again, this is within the last year, so 365 days, that shows that the provider was not able to provide service to your location within 10 business days. So that's the basic requirement that FCC has for reliable broadband, should be accessible within 10 business days. The last piece, we also have a screenshot here as an example. So if they charged more than standard installation fee to get service to your location, that would also qualify. A lot of times we've heard that, there's this charge for extra fiber that has to be laid down to actually get internet to that location. So, some of those examples might also fall in this category where you're having to pay a lot more to actually get that internet access to your location. With the next one, so the speed test, I know in previous webinars we've shared the beadchallenge.org website with you. That just makes it easier for users to actually record their 3 speed tests on 3 separate days so that it's all collected and successfully submitted to the state if that's a valid challenge. But you are obviously welcome to use other speed test platforms as well. So on here, it's essentially screenshots of the speed test platform that you're using. We have a screenshot here from beatchallenge.org, which shows, the speeds at that location are less than the threshold. So 16.1 for download, 1.3 for upload is what we're seeing. So whenever anything's below the threshold, beatchallenge.org is going to prompt you to submit that information because it would qualify for a successful challenge. So that's one way to go. And yeah, you'll have to do it 3 times on 3 separate days. So that would be a good challenge. If you're an organization that's collecting this data from an individual separately, then again, it would have to be those 3 screenshots that have similar information. And then you'll also have to fill out the CSV that we're going to be discussing later. But beatchallenge.org just makes it easy and you wouldn't have to capture a lot of that information on your side if you're a local government or nonprofit working with individuals. Then we have latency. This is when the latency exceeds 100 milliseconds. This is when it would be a valid challenge. So in the screenshot here again from beatchallenge.org, we see it's 120. So this was qualify for a successful challenge. And again, there could be different platforms used. We have an example here from beatchallenge.org.
And I just want to jump in and reiterate something that Shubhika shared, that just we've gotten questions about this. So individuals who want to participate directly in the challenge process can take challenges on their own using beadchallenge.org without ever involving any sort of local government or nonprofit partner because of how the data is collected on the back end. So that is still a valid option. That is something that has been happening for a couple of weeks now and continue to happen through the end of the challenge window. The alternative is for whatever reason, you know, a local nonprofit has a relationship with a couple of community members and they prefer to work with them to collect screenshots of their speed tests or other documentation. That is, you know, a welcome path as well. So just know that there are two different ways. One, the individual can be more independent. The other, the nonprofit or local government may play a larger role there.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Devon. Moving on to the next challenge types. So data cap, if there is an unreasonable capacity allowance, which is referred to as the data cap on the consumer. So the threshold here is 600 GB. That is what, if it's, you know, anything less than that, that could be a successful challenge. So again, a screenshot from the provider website would be a good piece of evidence for this kind of challenge. And one thing to note here is all of these different data caps are applied to different packages that an ISP might be offering. So in the screenshot here, for example, you know, the user actually has a cap of 250 GB. They could challenge this and it would be a successful challenge only if this particular provider does not offer something that, you know, has 600 GB or more. So if you are subscribing to a package that has a data cap less than 600 GB because it's more affordable to you, that does make sense, but you wouldn't be able to challenge that because the ISP does provide a plan with a higher data cap that would meet with, you know, FCC's definitions for this particular category. With technology, again, if the technology that's reflected on the map for that particular location through that provider is incorrect, that can be challenged. On here, we have an example of the modem that's being used. If it is something that, you know, provides service only through a specific technology, so this is a cable modem. And if the ISP has reported fiber service at that location, but, you know, you have a cable modem that shows that it can only receive service through cable technology, then that could be a good piece of evidence for this kind of challenge. Then we have business service only. So if that provider has reported service at your location, which is residential, but they only offer business services, that would be under this category. And again, a screenshot from the provider webpage would be a good example. A lot of times it's as, you know, just similar, go in, type in your address, and if it shows this looks like a business address, like in this screenshot, that would be, you know, valid evidence for such kind of a challenge. We also heard from Knox County last week that they are seeing some of this and working with their provider to actually collect all of that information on bulk and submit it to the state. So there might be similar, you know, instances with your communities. So just look out for that and work with your residents accordingly. Moving on to the next challenge type, so enforceable commitment. This is when, you know, that location might be served through an existing state or federal grant program and meets with BEAD requirements, but it's not reflected that way on the BEAD challenge map. So that would fall in the enforceable commitment challenge category. What would be a good example for this would be, you know, a legal agreement that shows that this location would be covered through that particular program. We do have, again, CSV following on, you know, the information that's supposed to be submitted with this, but I think with these kind of challenges, it's also important that you know, give us as much information as possible. So if there are maps, if there are CSVs that show that, you know, all of these locations need to be covered as part of this enforceable commitment, that would be really helpful in making those determinations about whether or not this should be part of enforceable commitment or not. Then we have the planned service type. So this is when a challenger has knowledge that they'll be deploying service to this location by June 30th, 2024. And it's, again, not reflected on the maps that way yet. We are also hearing that there might be instances where existing service is not reported on the BDC maps just because, that's the timeline, a delay in when that's reflected. So if that's the case, that could also be submitted through planned service challenge type. For this kind of a challenge, if it's more on, the building phase with planned service, there could be contracts that show ongoing deployment, all the permits that were received to actually carry out the infrastructure build out. All of those could be valid pieces of evidence. We have a screenshot there of a generic template, but then, specific to your program and plan service, that is something that you could include. If there are other binding contracts or agreements that again help show that, this is being planned and going to be deployed by June 30th, 2024, that would be a valid piece of evidence. If there's service that's already existing but not reflected, a good piece of evidence would be any consumer bills from the last 12 months that can show that service was actually provided to these consumers in these particular areas. And if there is, a copy of the offer that was sent to these locations, that service is now available. So that could also be a good piece of evidence for reporting existing service under the planned service challenge type. With not part of enforceable commitment, this is when maybe you go onto the BEAD challenge map and that location shows up as served through a different federal or state program, but that's not the case based on your understanding. So that would be a not part of enforceable commitment challenge type. And examples here would be declaration that it's not an enforceable commitment because, yeah, we use data sources available to us to get to those determinations. But if that's not the case, we need that declaration. And again, any additional information that actually helps validate that, that location should not be part of enforceable commitment, that would be super helpful. Location is a CAI. So if on the BEAD challenge map, certain location is not currently marked as a CAI, and Devon previously shared that slide, which has the 8 categories that we list under CAIs. So if your location is something that we have missed from our list, this would be the challenge that you file. So we have an example here, of a screenshot that shows this is the work that's happening. So an electric bill here, that can show that this would actually be a CAI. In the later slides, we're going to show all the other information that's needed as well for this kind of challenge. There's also a space to actually share your explanation for that, why this should be included. So again, there's some scope for actually sharing some additional language with these kind of challenges. Location is not a CAI. So if it is currently marked as a CAI on the map, and I think Devon already mentioned, there might be instances where it shows up on a different location on the map. So that's one kind of challenge. But in some instances, you might be aware that that's not in fact a CAI itself. So this would be the kind of challenge. Look at the address for sure. So on here, we have an example of a map screenshot again. So if you just type on the address on Google and it does not show up as a CAI, maybe that's valid enough. So that would be location is not a CAI, but it is currently reflected that way on the BEAD challenge map.
I think one other example here is if it's a residential location. So let's say it was a nonprofit that may have been registered with the person's home address, and that is what's showing up on the map. A valid challenge is, demonstrating that it is indeed a residence and not a community anchor institution.
And now in this slide, going over challenges for CAI specifically, they can generally participate in all of the other challenges, but we think these might apply more specifically to CAIs. So with speed tests for challenges, again, the threshold for speeds for CAIs is different. They should be able to access 1 gigabit symmetrical speeds. So if that's not the case, they can challenge and switch to eligible for their particular location. Again, can use beadchallenge.org or other platforms. One thing to note here is that if a CAI is taking this speed test, they should already be subscribed to 1 gigabit plans. If not, then that's, we cannot validate if they have access or not. They must just have subscribed to a lower plan. The other way is, availability. So if you are aware that you cannot access any kind of gigabit service at your location, that would fall under the availability challenge type, and you wouldn't necessarily have to do the speed test because you don't subscribe to gigabit symmetrical already. The pieces of evidence here are similar to availability challenge. So if it's a screenshot from the provider website, if service has been refused within the last 180 days, any kind of communication around that, if there's lack of suitable infrastructure to get you access to gigabit symmetrical through fiber, and denied request or installation within 10 business days. And the last one being if there's higher fees that's being charged to actually get you access to that 1 gigabit symmetrical. So that would again be good pieces of evidence for this kind of challenges, also for CAIs.
And I think one thing to just echo and kind of highlight, given questions that we've gotten, is that the speed threshold that we're looking for is different for a CAI than it is for an individual household. So if you're a household taking the speed test, you're looking for, are you above or below 25 over 3 megabits per second or 100 over 20 megabits per second, to make sure that that location is classified within the right unserved, underserved, or served. With CAIs, it's more of a binary. So either you can enroll in gigabit symmetrical service within 10 days or you can't. And that will determine whether or not that CAI is eligible, and how that shows up on the map will kind of be the grounds for how one might be interested in submitting a challenge. Great.
Yeah, I think passing it on back to Devon for.
Sounds good. Can folks still hear me okay? I'm not sure if I froze. All right, I'll keep rolling. So next we're going to go through bulk CSV templates. And we're gonna walk through this because I think we introduced it a couple of weeks ago, but there have been a couple of changes as we've learned more and refined. So we will highlight kind of what's different. We won't walk through every single detail again, but know that these will be available online today. They're in progress right now, along with slides like this to kind of guide you through what to look for. All right. So putting this in context, we're talking about a bulk challenge right now. Who are bulk challenges for? Who are they most relevant for? This is for a challenger who wants to submit a lot of challenges, and going through the map might be time consuming or just less convenient. And they want to just, list out whether it's 100, 1,000 challenges on one spreadsheet. You do need to have the location IDs or CAI IDs to be able to submit a bulk challenge. So a bulk challenger likely has access to the FCC fabric or has gone into the map, selected everything they're interested in, and downloaded it in a CSV so they can pull the relevant information into their bulk challenges. So again, happy to take questions about this, but just sort of know that if you are an individual or you're representing a nonprofit, a local government, and you may be interested in just submitting a couple of challenges, this will likely not apply to you. If you want to submit a lot of challenges, meaning 50, 100, 1,000, this is for you. So we will have an individual CSV template per challenge type, with the exception of 2 that share the same required fields. So these will have a shared CSV. So everything is organized by challenge type. So the first step is to identify what sort of challenge are you pulling together. If it's speed, then you'll want to download that speed CSV. So we'll have links to download these as well as a zip file if you want to download them all. And then in the bottom right, this is an example of what one of these CSVs looks like. It's pretty simple, but over the next couple of slides, we'll explain what each of these fields means, highlighting what might have changed since we previewed this a couple weeks ago, and answer any questions about that. Again, flashing up challenge type codes Every CSV template will ask you for the challenge type code. And this will be the same for everything in your CSV because every template is specific to one challenge type. So if you're submitting 100 latency challenges, you'll be writing L down the line for all 100 rows. Another point of reference is you will be asked for a technology code in many of the challenge types. And so again, we'll have this table handy on the website and in some reference slides so you can pull the appropriate technology code based on the technology that you are challenging, again, if it is applicable. All right, so the first challenge type is availability. There will be a CSV called availability. I'll point out the basics on this one and then just highlight, what might be different in the others. So for most of them, you'll need the challenge type, so that code, which you could get from our website or from any past version of the slides that lists those codes. You'll need the location ID or the CAI ID. You should be able to grab this from the challenge map or from the fabric data, or we'll have that list of all CAIs posted online so you can grab it from there. Note that the location ID is for households and businesses, otherwise known as BSLs, and the CAI ID is for community anchor institutions. The FCC provider ID, this is a code that's generated by the FCC. We'll do the work for you and be posting a table online so you can pull it directly from there. Similarly with technology code, every technology has its own reference code, and we will make that available for you as well. This is one new element here, residential or business. So we want to know from you, are you challenging a residence or are you challenging a business, which is important in case there is a shared space. So there might be a commercial space on the bottom with apartments on top. And so we just want to understand which location you're challenging. If you are challenging a residential location and there is a unit, an apartment number, or a business location and there is a suite number, we ask you to fill in building unit. If there is no unit or suite number, you can just ignore this field altogether. And then finally, there's a series of reason codes. So we'll have this chart available and you'll read these through and select the number that best describes your challenge. So for example, number 1 is provider failed to schedule a service installation within 10 business days of a request. If that is your challenge and that's the evidence you have, you'll put number 1 in that field and be good to go. Then we have a CSV template for speed. Not many changes here other than, again, just highlighting you'll need the location ID or the CAI ID if you're challenging something specific to a CAI, and then indicating that residential or business. And the bottom 2 rows here are for you to indicate the speed that you measured through your speed test, and you'll put that right in there. That should align with the evidence that you're submitting. Latency, no real highlights here, pretty similar to the past couple. The only changes at the bottom, you will type out your latency, just the number that you get through your speed test, and should match the results of the speed test that you are uploading as evidence. Data cap will have its own CSV, and nothing new to highlight here that was too different from the others. Plan service, which you can also submit existing service through. There will be a field for you to indicate whether you are telling us that there is planned service in this location or existing service. So we need to be able to sort those on our end. And so we'll ask that you either put a P if it is planned or an E for existing service. And then whatever the speeds are for the planned service or the existing service, indicate those in the last 2 fields, the advertised download and upload speed, based on what the provider either currently offers or plans to offer. Enforceable commitment will also be its own CSV. You'll also have the opportunity here to highlight whether it is a residential or business location. And then we ask that you write out the enforceable commitment program name. So if it's a federal grant, write that federal grant name in the description. And then the download and upload maximum speeds that you are committed to providing through that grant. In the reverse, if it is not part of an enforceable commitment, this is its own CSV template as well, and you'll fill in similar information here. These, I believe we did not cover when we first went over the CSVs, so highlighting them here. This one is location is a CAI. So let's say that you have proof that a building is a school or a hospital or a employment center, senior center, and it is not currently showing up on the map as a community anchor institution. Location is the CAI will be the challenge type that you will be interested in. So we'll ask that you select a CAI type from the CAI list. So you'll see that every category has a corresponding letter code. So there's a code for parks, there's a code for hospitals, there's a code for housing, etc. So we'll ask for that code. We'll ask for the type of entity that is being challenged, the address, so kind of breaking that out into address, city, state, zip. Category code, we have a handy table on the right here, so you'll put in the letter that is most applicable to your case, and then just a brief explanation on why this location should be listed as a CAI. We ask that you keep this brief, and then a couple of quirks here to make sure it loads correctly in the system. Try and avoid commas and try and keep this on one line. So don't use the Alt-Enter feature. Just kind of type it out and it's fine if it goes a little bit longer. And then almost our last one here is location is not a CAI. So this might be at someone's house. It was mistakenly marked as a community anchor institution. So here you would indicate why it is not a CAI using one of these category codes on the right. And again, a brief explanation of why this should not be considered a CAI. And then the last template covers two challenge types, technology and business service only. This template is called all others, but really just know it's for technology and business service only. And you'll fill out these 4 fields. All right, and now I will close out our review session of the webinar. So next steps are a reminder to pre-register if you have not already. Pre-registration is required to access credentials to log into that challenge portal when it opens up. Upcoming webinars will be a walkthrough of the portal ahead of its launch date, and then an end-to-end challenge process training. Once the challenge process is open, we will be having daily office hours, either a 2-hour block or 2 1-hour blocks throughout the day. So stay tuned for a Zoom link to join those. We'll also have a running Q&A doc and ways to get support so we can all make the most of that 21 days that the challenge process is open. Of course, bookmark and review our landing page. And then you can still peruse that BEAD challenge map, which will be locked in very soon so you can start building your challenges. And with that, we can use the remaining time to take any questions.
I think I do see a question in the chat, Devon. So CAD asked, is there a priority for challenge types to use for locations that technically involve multiple types, such as a location whose speed doesn't meet the minimum requirements and the latency is also a concern? So I think my answer to this would be submit both challenges, just because all of this information is going to be going to that respected provider for rebuttal. So just so that you can share all the information on your end to like have a successful challenge, because there might be instances where the provider is able to share that they can actually, provide those speeds to your location or something like that. But if you have your latency information there, and they're not able to rebut that, that would still then categorize your location as underserved. So if there are locations like this that fall under multiple challenge types, we would recommend, submitting all information like for the different challenges, just so that there is a higher success rate with, that challenge getting accepted and the location being eligible for BEAD funding.
Yeah, I think that's right from my standpoint. If you are short on time or feel like you need to prioritize one over the other, I would say wherever the evidence is most clear, will just make it easier for us to kind of see that it's, a clear case of whatever you're trying to demonstrate. All right, I'm seeing another question. What challenge type do I use when an address has a house and may her maybe you can clarify, may outbuildings, houses served with fiber, outbuildings on the map are eligible, but they can be served. So let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly. So there's a building, but there might be other buildings either jutting out from it or on the same property, and you believe they can all be served because of fiber in the area. So if those are marked, if those separate houses are marked as unserved or underserved on the map, and you believe that they can be served, an availability challenge, I think would be, or an existing service challenge. Yeah, I think would be most appropriate. So there's a broader challenge type called plan service, and we're accepting existing service challenges under there, where you would just demonstrate that a provider can indeed serve that address. And Shubhika, I don't know if you want to expand on the evidence there.
Sure. I think the standard here again, if you're able to provide service to that location within 10 business days without any extra installation charges and things like that, I think that would qualify as that particular service being accessible to the location. So as Devon mentioned, yes, that would be, an existing service that can be submitted through the planned service challenge type. So yeah, we do see instances, and just some context around this is, we need to use the fabric as the base layer. So, all locations that have or can have access to broadband, we're kind of realizing that in the rural parts specifically, there are these instances where some of the outbuildings, as Herb mentioned, they show up as separate broadband serviceable locations. And hence, in the FCC reporting, if the provider has only shared feedback that they can provide access to the main house and not the other buildings, they would be reflected as eligible. So those would be instances where, you might have to submit these kind of challenges.
Yeah, getting to that level of precision will be really helpful. I'm seeing Adam's question, if an address is already identified as unserved or underserved on the challenge map, should we leave it alone or do they need to be challenged? I would say, broadly speaking, if it is unserved, marked as unserved, it will be eligible for funding. Sort of 100%, we need to cover them. If it is underserved and you believe that it should be categorized as unserved, it's likely worth submitting that challenge just to get it into that sort of first wave of priority. And more generally, I think prioritize challenges that will update the eligibility status on the map so the funds are going to the right places. But in general, we're trying to get the most accurate map that we can. So if your challenge doesn't have an impact on funding, but it is giving us more information, I would say maybe prioritize that second or third, but we would certainly welcome, more granular information about the locations. Great. Maybe we'll wait another minute to see if any questions come up, and then we will close out. And if you have questions about, anything beyond what we talked today about the map, happy to pull that up. We do have a little bit of time here. All right, well, I'm not seeing anything. So I think thank you everyone for participating and joining today. Thanks to Shubhika for being my co-presenter. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to either of us or broadband@illinois.gov for questions of sort of one-on-one walkthrough or training, anything that you need, we are here to help. All right, bye. Thanks everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks all.
Devon. Thank you, everyone. Want to remind everyone that we are doing another repeat session on February 7th at 12 p.m. Central Time. That's next Wednesday. And if you need to spread the word for anyone else to attend, that link is also going to be provided in the follow-up email as well as it is in the chat box.
Great. Thank you, Nancy, for hosting and coordinating as always. All right, everyone. Have a great Thursday.